An American and an Australian researcher have been arrested. One of them is very badly injured. Can you tell us how that happened and what their status is now?
They conducted illegal activities. They were summoned by the Chinese security people for questioning. During that period, Weston jumped from the third floor of a building to escape.
The Tibetans who live under Chinese occupation live under an extremely brutal regime. I cannot imagine what it must be like to not have any rights whatsoever. The authorities looked at me as if I was the worst possible criminal. As they found out more about my background, they were thinking more about how to make an example of me.
This is 27-year-old Wang Chuk. He is an American. As a child, his mother left him at a Buddhist monastery in Nepal. Explain to those of us, I don't mean this facetiously, but how do you become a nun after you had a child?
Well, I used to be Feather Meston. I was born in Hollywood. I was a cute little blonde California girl. We're talking the 60s. So in the week, I was a child welfare worker, but on the weekends, it was anything went, you know. I'd get all dressed up, take some LSD, and go down to the Shrine Auditorium. Everybody's stoned out of their minds. It's peace and love. But then in the middle of all that, my grandmother sent me Ram Dass's book, Be Here Now. He had done drugs. I could relate. He had gone to India. Oh, that's interesting. He had met a guru. Now it's getting really interesting. Well, I need to go to India and find a guru. This is where it gets sticky.
She treated me kindly. She hugged me and brought me little gifts. I knew she was a special person in my life, but I didn't understand how we were connected. I dreamed she would take my hand and we would walk out the gate together to her home. I was the only white child in the entire monastery. My whiteness was immediately an issue. Some monks claimed my white skin was a sign of decay and called me Kur, which means rotten.
I'd visit him, and then I'd have to leave, and they knew it was going to be a hard separation. Wangchu would be reaching out with his hands going, "Mummy, Mummy, don't leave, don't leave."
A package arrived in the mail. Inside was an American magazine. If I could read it, I would have discovered that my parents were Jewish. My grandfather, John Meston, was the creator of a famous TV show called Gunsmoke, and that my grandmother, Rosemary, was a beautiful model and actress who committed suicide before I was born. I also learned that my mother thought that life apart from me was better for us both, and that she didn't think I missed her.
A couple times, maybe he was now 14, 15, he'd run away, and he'd suddenly show up on my doorstep. One time he said, "Maybe I do want to go and live in the States and not be a monk one day."
My parents were nomads from Tibet. My mom and dad never went to school. They took care of their animals. They just go with the nature. After the Chinese invasion, my parents fled Tibet and escaped. I heard that there was an Indian guy who speaks Tibetan better than Tibetans. He seemed so gentle and kind. So I said, "Do you want to meet?" And I think he said, "Sure." And that was it. I won a lottery.
China prepares to relocate nearly 60,000 impoverished farmers to an area now inhabited by Tibetan and Mongolian herdsmen.
The World Bank approved the project in June over the objections of human rights organizations, Tibetan rights advocates, and environmental groups.
When I heard the World Bank make statements that the Tibetans were very supportive, it sort of raised a red flag in my mind. I know that if Tibetans do have an issue with anything, they cannot speak out publicly. It was an important thing to find out what the Tibetans themselves had to say directly.
There was this real sense of commitment, I think on his part, that there were injustices being done to the Tibetan people and he wanted to do whatever he could to shine the light on it. The guy had two souls, and one of them was there amongst those people. A number of the monks who were with us had already been in prison and they'd already been tortured. Some of them had cattle prod marks on them, burns. Some of them had clear broken bones and had been beaten.
For Dasha to go back into China, I think was very, very dangerous. And I think he thought that too.
Somebody comes in my room and says, "Have you seen the newspaper?" And it was my son, it was Wang Chuk. Oh my gosh, you know.
They were trying to trap me into admitting to having spied. They knew how to mentally turn somebody upside down.
That led him to try to escape, which led him to jump from a window, which there wasn't a good landing.
I knew I was going to go there and get him out no matter what condition he was. I whispered in his ears, I said, "I'm not leaving here without you." I said, "I'm here to get you out."
We have assurance now that Mr. Meston could be medevaced and that they will resolve his legal case by the time he's able to travel.
It took something this dramatic to stop the project, and it ultimately got canceled.
Yeah, he got injured, but there's the other side of it too. It had some good effect. And he became a complete hero to the Tibetans, Wang Chuk. So I'd go down to McCluggange and they'd find out I was his mother. Wow, Wang Chuk, he did so good for the Tibetans. He'd helped so much, oh, thank you.
He physically never recovered from that jump. His heels were so shattered, his body was shattered, his mind was traumatized.
He had been going through a lot of surgeries and hospitalization, and he was uncomfortable and generally not his old self.
I think I'll remember for the rest of my life Puni's phone call in sheer desperation and fear in her voice. "You've got to come to the house. Something's happened to Wang Chuk. Come now." In this sort of farmhouse they lived in, there was a side building that was another sort of a refuge spot that Wang Chuk would take refuge in. And here he took sadly his final refuge.